Welcome to episode 198 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is ready to embrace all that fall brings, John Scott Sloat.
How is that, Doc? How am I embracing all the things?
It's the leaves, it's the food, it's the
lack of sunshine,
it's fall
dampness,
it's the quarter zips, it's the warmer clothes.
I do have on a quarter zip today. You have some sort of flannel hoodie thing going on.
It's a shacket.
A shacket?
Are you not familiar with that term?
No. It's a shirt that's also a jacket.
It's a flannel. A very fuzzy flannel, as you can see the inside.
Yeah, it's got a good lining.
Yeah, but it's got a built-in hoodie. So it's a shirt and a jacket, hence a shacket. Yeah.
Is the shirt itself advertised that way, or is this something you've dubbed?
Oh, no. This is not my term. No.
Okay.
No. So, yeah, we are recording on our fall break.
Yep. I suppose students aren't here.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything to you really anymore.
Well, you want to know what? Students had Friday off, right?
Yes. Yeah. Friday and then this Monday. Yeah.
And I pulled on campus on Friday and just went, what happened?
Did you miss the rapture?
So that was one thought I had. Another thought I had was there was a time change that I had just missed. And I was to work an hour early. That was the other thought I had.
That's coming up, though, right? A couple weeks yet?
I think it's in November.
That's too late.
Is it too late?
It's too late. It needs to be moved up.
I don't know. I was thinking November. I looked it up recently.
No, I'm saying I think you're right. In my personal opinion, I wish it was earlier.
I'd rather just abolish it altogether.
I don't know. I like the summer evenings where the sun's setting at like 9:30. I like those. I just think we should need to end it sooner. Because by the time they end it in like the first week of November, it's dark till like 8:30 in the morning.
It's rough when you're starting. I remember teaching class and it was still dark.
And you're rolling in and it's pitch black, like it's the middle of the night.
That's tough.
It's tough. All right. If you'd like to contact the show, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. You could email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, and of course, we would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and a review. And John, as I mentioned in the intro, this is episode 198, meaning we are just 2 episodes away from the big 200.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is.
Gosh, that's a lot of episodes.
I'd be curious. I'm sure there are stats out there somewhere. Like, how many podcasts, like what percentage of podcasts do 200 episodes?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's got to be small.
It's got to be pretty small.
There's so many podcasts out there that start off and then just
fizzle.
Mm-hmm. But we are here for, and we have a very special episode planned for episode 200.
Knock on wood. Yeah.
Something that has never been done in the history of the Various and Sundry podcast.
Yep, that has a 200 episode history now.
Yeah.
Or close to 200 episode history.
Yeah, so
should be fun.
That's something to look forward to.
Indeed.
Something unprecedented. All right, you ready to talk some sports?
Sure.
You want to start with college football or NFL?
Let's do college.
All right, so this weekend, Ohio State pummeled Purdue.
Yeah, you called it a trap game last week.
Well, they've had some stunning losses at Purdue in the past, but Ohio State dominated from the start. And the most encouraging thing out of that whole thing was, not to go too deep dive on this, but Ohio State has struggled to run the ball consistently. And there have been a lot of, I think, legitimate criticisms of the offensive line as well as scheme, like basically trying to run a run scheme that our offensive linemen were not best suited for. And this week, it felt like the coaches actually took seriously, okay, that old stuff's not working. Let's try a bunch of new stuff. and they found some success in some things.
I appreciate when coaches do that and
Yeah.
not just stay true to what the plan was. They're able to shift and make adjustments.
Well, and at some point you just have to realize we might prefer this scheme, but maybe our players just don't fit that scheme.
Yeah.
And so let's change the scheme a little bit to fit what our players do well. And so I was more encouraged at what I saw there in terms of that. Now they have a big test coming up this upcoming weekend, playing at home against Penn State.
Bum, bum, bum.
So that's a huge matchup. And although I'm not radiating optimism about that matchup, I feel much better about it now than I did last week in light of some of the positive changes I saw in terms of what our offense is trying to do. So we'll see. We'll see if it works. But if they had just kept doing the same things that weren't working again this past week, I would have been like, we're done.
By the way, going to the Wayback Machine, did Ryan Day ever find Lou Holtz?
I'm not aware that he did.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yes, but it has produced some good memes.
Yeah.
So, he did not call out any former Purdue coaches at the end of this game.
Okay. I wouldn't even know who to call out. Drew Brees. I mean, he played quarterback.
Quarterback,
there,
yeah.
Where's Drew Brees?
Yeah. Where is he? Otherwise, let's see. Once again, Michigan plays nobody, so they rolled comfortably.
I was offered tickets to that game.
Were you really?
Yep, by our chaplain offered me a ticket.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Notre Dame dominated the University of Spoiled Children.
Yeah, I don't know who Notre Dame is. Like they lose to Ohio State in a close game.
Mm-hmm.
They got beat by Louisville.
Yes.
And then they step into Southern California and dominate.
Yes.
Who are they?
Well, I think they're a very good football team that just played through an incredibly tough stretch of games. They had Ohio State at home. Then they went on the road at Duke, who was number 10 in the country at that point.
That's right. I forgot about Duke.
Had a last-minute win. Then went to Louisville, and you could just tell I think they were just gassed. Louisville beat them. And then they exposed how overrated USC is. USC's defense is atrocious. And then but really the other big game was Oregon against Washington. Did you catch any of this?
I know there was a major upset. I know Washington beat Oregon.
I wouldn't call it a major upset, though.
Enough to storm the field.
They were both ranked in the top 10.
Oh.
The big story really coming out of that is the fact that Oregon's coach went for it on fourth down 3 times in this game and didn't get it.
Wow.
Twice in the red zone, and then wrap your brain around this. Oregon is up 4 with about a minute 45 left. They have 4th and 2.
4th and 2.
At midfield.
They went for it?
They went for it. Instead of punting the ball and pinning Washington deep and forcing them to drive the length of the field. They went for it, didn't get it. Washington scores too quickly, honestly. They score in 2 plays. So Oregon gets the ball back, marches it down the field, and misses a 45-yard field goal. That would have sent it to overtime.
Grace has an alum that works in the sports information department at Washington.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. He was posting some cool photos.
Yeah, he's good at his job.
He really is. Really, really good.
He grew up in my neighborhood. Did you know that?
Did he really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, his parents still live in our neighborhood. So
that's fun.
Yeah. My wife was one of his teachers.
Ah.
So
that's great.
Yeah. Let's talk pro football now.
Okay.
Got to start with your Jets, Jets.
Yeah. So we beat the Eagles, the undefeated Eagles.
Yeah.
Had 3 picks of Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Including one with a minute left in the game, and we returned it to the 5 and ultimately won the game based on the touchdown we scored from there. What was great about that moment was so locally we had Lions Buccaneers.
Yeah.
And they cut about 2 plays before that interception. So I got to see that interception and Andrea is right next to me. A rare moment she's watching football. And Tony Adams intercepts the ball, is running back. Stiff arms Jason Kelce on the way back. And my wife goes, well, his name's Kelce. Is that Taylor Swift's Kelce? No. Babe, that's Jason Kelce. That's his older brother. He's married. Here's a little bit about Jason Kelce. He goes, oh, I've listened to his podcast before.
What?
Yes.
Your wife has listened to their podcast?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people that I think the subscribers to that podcast went through the roof.
I'm sure.
And so she clarified that she had not gone out and sought that podcast and listened to it, but had seen clips of it on Instagram and things like that.
I see.
But it was just I just died laughing that she knew. She's like, oh, I've listened to Jason Kelce's podcast. I've never listened to the Kelce Brothers podcast.
Yeah. So apparently the secret to growing the audience of a podcast is for one of the hosts to date a superstar.
Yeah.
So which one of us is going to take the bullet?
That's not going to happen for either of us. For either of us.
Oh, I guess there are limits to what we'll do to grow the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Morals indeed.
Yes.
I'd be remiss if we did not mention that the Browns beat the undefeated 49ers as well. So
the Browns were playing with basically some guy they brought off the street to play quarterback. I mean, they don't have Deshaun Watson right now.
Yep.
Now, it's a great win. Browns played great. Their defense was terrific. Though I will say, at the risk of inciting the ire of some Browns fans, the 49ers did end up losing Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey in that game to injury. But, it's the NFL.
Injuries happen.
Mm-hmm. So props to the Browns for that's a big win. Now, it also, again, risking the ire here, it is an advantage to be the Browns and play a 1 o'clock kickoff against a West Coast team.
Oh, because you're on your natural time
3-hour time difference, right? So body clock still maybe at about 10 a.m. I know they go a few days early and try to adjust their body clocks. I get it. But anyway, none of that takes away from the fact that the Browns just beat a very good football team. The team, probably the best team in the NFC, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, between them and the Eagles, yeah.
Yeah, props to them. So are we learning that the NFC is not as good as the AFC then? Because the two best NFC teams lost to AFC teams that are not at the top of their divisions.
Yeah. Maybe. I
Probably
mean,
too small of a sample size.
What AFC teams would be better than the Eagles or the 49ers? The Chiefs haven't been great this year.
They have not. I mean, they've been winning games, and
they'll probably turn it on back half.
And the Bills, they've been disappointing. I mean, they struggled to beat a Giants team last night that they should not be struggling to beat.
Yeah.
So, the Dolphins.
Yeah, the Dolphins have been good. Been scary good.
I don't know. Ohio State update, obviously. Justin Fields got hurt in the Browns game, dislocated his thumb. So
in the Browns game?
No. Bears game.
Bears game.
Yeah. And C.J. Stroud finally threw a pick.
Okay.
So he threw 2 or 3 touchdown passes as well. So,
The Texans win?
They did.
Who'd they beat? Washington?
I think so. I'd have to look it up. But, I mean, the fact that we're in game 6 now before he finally threw a pick.
Yeah.
I think he's performing way better than anybody expected, honestly. I mean, he's the number 2 pick, but you just don't expect.
Yeah, so is Zach Wilson.
That's true. He has been better than people expect. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Maybe the biggest news to come out this weekend for the Jets is that video clip. I'm sure you've seen
of Aaron Rodgers throwing the football.
Aaron Rodgers standing up and just leisurely throwing the football. Not on crutches.
Yep.
Just
not in a boot.
Just throwing a football.
There's talk. I mean, some of the reporters are saying he's going to be back this regular season. That'd be remarkable.
Have they come up with some new treatment for Achilles injuries that makes this possible?
I mean, I'm sure his treatment involves shrooms and other
maybe
illicit drugs, but
yeah, it's possible.
That could be a part of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting, though. I mean, if he comes back this season, it'll be It'll be kind of like, do you remember when Adrian Peterson tore his ACL and was back in 6 months or whatever it was? It'll be like that.
Yeah.
Even maybe a little bit more impressive seeing how much older he is than Adrian Peterson was during that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just made me wonder, what have they done? What medical advances have they made in treatment that looks like – I mean, when he had that injury and people were talking about, well, he's hoping that he'd get back if they could get to the playoffs. That's ridiculous. Achilles are a 9 to 12 month
Yeah,
thing.
I was thinking training camp next year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if he could be back in, well, that was what, September?
September 11th.
Yeah, there you go. He could be back in 3.5 months.
That'd be wild.
That'd be unprecedented.
That'd be absolutely wild.
Yeah. All right. We should probably move on. You ready to move on?
Sure.
Today we continue our series in 2 Peter and the series of character qualities that we are to pursue as Christians. And so today we are at godliness. So John, why don't you go ahead and read just to reorient our conversation. 2 Peter 1, starting in verse 5 and going through verse 8.
Okay. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Okay, so we're talking godliness today.
Indeed.
It's, I mean, this is, in one sense, one of those characteristics that I think is a little broader than some of the other ones. Mm-hmm. Some of the other ones feel more specific. To me, godliness feels like it's a little bit more of a broad term. And so, yeah, I think this was my attempt to flesh out what a definition would be. It's a Godward orientation of life expressed in thoughts, feelings, attitudes, speech, and action. So I think that's kind of where I would start. If you think of just the fact that the entirety of one's life is oriented towards God. Mm-hmm. That I think that speaks to the totality of the nature of godliness. It's a holistic concept. How do you think? What comes to your mind when you think of that term, godliness?
You know, I was just thinking about this a little bit before we hopped on the pod, and sometimes different authors of Scripture talk about the same thing with using different words. Yep. And anytime I think about godliness, I think about John's concept of abiding or remaining.
Okay.
So think John 15, abide in the vine. What does it mean to abide in Jesus, or what does it mean to abide with God? And I think this covers a lot of it, that as you're going throughout your day, you sort of have this perspective of having God with you and having a pious orientation toward Him, whether it's sending an email, giving trying to think of it as you're giving feedback on a paper for you and me that matters. For how we deal with our grocer, how we deal with just about anybody in our lives. That's kind of godliness, and so I pair godliness and abiding from John's gospel together.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I think in terms of trying to think of analogies, I think of one obvious one that comes to my mind is a compass. No matter what direction you're facing, the needle on the compass is pointing north. So it orients you that no matter where you're facing, well, that's north. That's a fixed reality.
Yeah.
And from that, I can then orient myself, whatever I'm doing, whatever direction I'm heading. That's kind of the way I think about godliness in terms of the orientation of our lives is directed towards God, which then helps give us a sense of direction and purpose and also shapes whatever we're doing in terms of actions, speech, etc.
Have you ever tried to walk with a compass?
Not recently. I probably did as a kid at some point, but
I remember being in high school and going on a wilderness retreat, and I remember they were like, "All right, you're going to follow this trajectory on your compass, and you're going to go that way." And I remember I just sort of blitzed off in that direction. But then there were a couple of guys who knew what they were doing, and we kind of stayed with them, and they would stand in one spot, say, "We're going to go at this direction." They would send somebody out, and they would walk 25, 30 yards, basically hold up a handkerchief, and he would say, "One step to the left, one step to the right," until they were right on it, and then say, "Stop," and then that guy would walk to him, and then they'd do that again until they got to where they ultimately wanted to go. And I think that connects with godliness a little bit. That sort of precision, that sort of direction, that sort of preciseness comes along with it.
Yeah, and I think one of the values of talking about godliness is because it's such a broad and general term, and it goes against this tendency that I see in our culture, and even I see it in our in the church. I see it among our students. This tendency to divide up your life into different categories, of which the spiritual is one category. Like, oh, well, I've got my physical life, taking care of my body, eating, exercise, whatever.
Sure.
And I've got my sort of mental health, and I've got my academic stuff. And you divide your life up into all these little tidy little categories, and then you go, well, and then of course there's my spiritual life, as if that's one of 3, 5, 7, 12, whatever number of boxes you want to say your life consists of.
Yeah.
And that's not a biblical perspective at all. And yet I hear people talking in those ways, and I see people, in essence, even kind of mapping out their day or their week or things like that. If they're a very sort of intentional, kind of thoughtful person, they might be like, well, I got to make sure I take care of my spiritual life. And so I bracket in my quiet time, and then I bracket in my exercise time and my study time. And it's not that putting together a schedule is a bad thing. It's a great thing. It's a really helpful thing. But if you are doing that in a way that you're like, well, the spiritual area of my life is just one of those boxes that I'm trying to check, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So how do we help people then see that that's not a biblical way of approaching one's life?
Yeah, I mean, one way to think through it is to certainly work would be a category in those boxes. Think about how your faith impacts that. Think about faith and work, or think about faith and mental health, or think about faith and fill in the blank, and how I think there's broad agreement that faith should impact those things, at least among our students and probably among our church-going listeners, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah. So how does it impact that, and how does it engage those topics? That's naturally what comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of a couple of passages. I think of the fact that when Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And again, he's not saying, well, these are the 4 categories. There's your strength category, there's your soul category, there's your mind category. No, it's his way of saying with everything you are.
Everything.
With everything you are. which of course he's just really quoting Deuteronomy 6. So it's not like he's coming up with something new.
The Shema.
And so I think that's where I'd start to point people towards text specifically, like no, that's not how it works. Like you can't just divide your life up and make the spiritual one of several or many. It's supposed to be the totality of your life is oriented towards God. And then that means you have to do the hard work of figuring out, okay, so what does it mean for me to love God with the way that I work, the way that I study, the way that I treat my body, the way that I interact with others? In all those different contexts, what does it look like to love God? Another text I'd point people to is Romans 12. The whole idea of offer your lives as living sacrifice. Offer yourself as living sacrifices. Like the totality of your life is to be offered as a sacrifice to God. So it's not even a sort of, well, yeah, I check the spiritual box. I go to church on Sundays. I check the box. I have my quiet times. I check the box. And that undercuts the, like, you are supposed to be experiencing, this gets back to the abide stuff, like you're supposed to be experiencing the presence of God in every aspect of your life and trying to orient what you're doing, thinking, saying, believing, feeling towards God and what his word says.
Yeah. And those are controllable realities as well. Like just hearing you say, I'm supposed to direct how I feel toward God. Well, that's something you can control and worship God with.
Or at least that you make every effort to. I mean, feelings and emotions are tricky. There's extremes, right? There's those who are just completely given over to them and are just like, well, whatever my emotions go, that's where I go too. And I don't try to fight against it. And there are those who, think that all emotions are somehow bad and like try to stuff them or avoid them. And the biblical pictures are emotions need to be sanctified. And that the Psalms regularly talk to us about how we should feel. I know pop psychology says otherwise, but like God considers himself to have the authority, the right to say, here's how you should feel.
Yeah.
You should grieve over that. You should rejoice over this. You should delight in this. You should hate that. It's all over the Psalms.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the way that we try to retrain our emotions is to immerse ourselves in the Word so that our emotions start to line up with what God loves and with what God hates and with what God wants us to delight in and what he wants us to reject and those sorts of things. And also, honestly, that's where I think corporate worship helps as well, because good corporate worship reorients our emotions as well as assuming it's based on truth in the lyrics and that sort of thing. We're not just talking about emotionalism, but I think corporate worship can help that as a sort of reorienting of this is what is good and beautiful and what I should long for and what I should not long for.
Yeah.
And I think that's an underappreciated aspect of gathering in the body, I think.
Yeah, that's always I run into a seminarian every now and then who goes like, my goodness, I wish I could just have 2 sermons and get rid of the music in church. And my pushback is like, actually corporate worship's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's been part of the Christian tradition for a long time. Ephesians talks about corporate worship. These are positive things that turn your emotions to God.
Well, and you think about it, which are there more of in the Bible? Songs or written out sermons? It's songs.
It's got to be songs, yeah.
I mean, there's 150 of them in the book of Psalms by themselves, let alone other places.
Yeah.
There's not 150 like summary/transcripts of sermons in the Bible. There's a number of them.
Yeah.
But there's not 150. And so that's just there should be a both and here.
Yes,
not an
not an either or.
But
Because I've run into some people that want the opposite, right? They want their whole service to be singing.
Yeah. Okay, fine. If someone wants to give up and give like a little 5-minute devotional, great. But like, give me 45 minutes of music and worship. I'm like, well, no.
Yeah.
I mean, we need both.
Mm-hmm.
We need both. Any thoughts? Any last thoughts on godliness, or even how we can cultivate that? I mean, we've talked about corporate worship a little bit. We've talked about, obviously, participation in a local church. Those are kind of givens.
I even think just slowing down in the midst of your day, maybe not physically slowing down, but mentally slowing down.
Yeah.
And just taking a deep breath and saying a quick prayer under your breath, just like, Lord, help me orient this toward you. Help me live out your values and virtues now. And, and sort of slowing down in that regard can be a good way to abide.
Yeah. Something that I started doing about maybe a couple of years ago now is once I made the transition back to I keep track of my tasks and calendar digitally, but I have a moleskin notebook basically that I interact with more in terms of just like the daily, like here's what's on the agenda today. This meeting, this class, these tasks have to get done. Well, what I started doing was whatever I pick a verse or two from whatever chapter of the Bible I read that morning, and I write it out at the top of that page. So every time I'm looking back at what else is on my agenda today, what am I doing, I can look back at that, and it helps reorient me a little bit in terms of like, oh yeah, that struck me this morning as something I needed to hear or remember or trust in or turn from or whatever.
Yeah, small rebellion against the flesh.
There you go. There you go. So it's a small thing, but I've found it to be helpful. All right, John, you ready to move on?
Sure.
Time now for This Day in Sports History.
All right, today in sports history, October 17th, 2023, year of our Lord.
2 weeks away from Reformation Day and the day episode 200. I mean, could that be more? I mean, talk about God's sovereignty. The episode 200 of our pod drops on Reformation Day.
I just need to take a moment.
Martin Luther would be proud.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Is he much of a sportsman?
I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me.
I could see him getting into like UFC something.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, all right. This day in sports history, 1956, chess, the game of the century. 13-year-old Bobby Fischer defeats 1953 U.S. champion Donald Brine in the Rosenwald Memorial Tournament at Marshall Chess Club in New York City.
How's your chess game?
I know the rules. I don't know strategy. Okay. So I think I can get out there and move some pieces around, but
I'm about the same.
I don't know that I'd win.
But 13 years old.
Yeah, Bobby
beating the national champ.
Well, did you see the Bobby Fischer movie?
I never did, no.
He was a disturbed fella.
Yeah.
That'd be a biography worth reading, the Bobby Fischer biography.
Yeah.
If anybody has any recommendations, let me know.
There you
go. By the way, when I mentioned Rita's on here several weeks ago, do you remember this, the little ice cream place I went to in Florida?
Yeah.
I got like 2 to 3 messages, either by text, Twitter, that there was one in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, there you go.
That I could go to.
And you're in Columbus a decent bit.
A decent bit.
A few times a year?
Well, it's right around the corner from Zach and Ohio's
the mothership?
house.
Oh, from his house. Okay.
From his house, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So, all right, 1968, Bjorn Firm, did I get that right?
Probably.
Of Sweden beats Hungary's Andras Blazzo by just 11 points to take the gold medal in the modern pentathlon.
I think that's a type of pentathlon.
Pentathlon.
There should be an extra A in there.
Okay, at the Mexico City Olympics.
Okay.
I have to read that again. Sorry, I didn't actually. What's a pentathlon?
5 events.
5 events?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the half decathlon, right?
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
just half of them.
So if you drop out of the decathlon, can you just anyway?
I do not think so.
Okay. 1979 Baseball World Series, which it's funny we're talking about the World Series in 1979 happening now.
Yeah, still got a few weeks to go. We didn't even talk about baseball playoffs.
Yeah. Pittsburgh Pirates beat the Baltimore Orioles 4-1 at Memorial Stadium for 4 games to 3 series wins. MVP Pirates first baseman Willie Stargell.
Yeah.
Man, the World Series in early October. That's weird.
Ending in mid-October.
Yeah. 1983, the Green Bay Packers defeat the Washington Redskins 48-47 in the highest scoring game in Monday Night Football history.
It's a lot of points.
1983, that's a lot of points for 1983.
Yeah.
Must be a couple of porous defenses
Defense
there.
optional there.
Would that have been, who was the coach of the Redskins, the famous one?
Oh, Joe Gibbs.
Yeah, was Joe Gibbs coach in 83?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
1989, earthquake in San Francisco, 6.9 on the scale, cancels the third game of the World Series, kills 67 people.
Now that was
I was one.
yes. So obviously, you don't. But have you seen clips of
I've
them on the air when it starts happening and then the feed goes out?
Yeah, and like the highway splits in two.
Yeah.
Is that the
It's
one?
Like Al Michaels and I forget who else was in the booth. Like it was pregame. The game hadn't started yet, and they were doing the pregame talk, and then you kind of hear and see the camera shake, and then it's like the feed cuts out. It was eerie.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
And wild. 1989, or excuse me, I just did that one.
Yep.
2008. Here's the one with the name. Sachin Tendulkar becomes the highest run scorer ever in Test cricket, beating Brian Lara's record and passing 12,000 runs against Australia in Mohali.
Okay. Props to Sachin Tendulkar.
I had a listener text me this morning an article on cricket for baseball fans.
Okay. I mean, I sent you the YouTube clip.
videos. Yeah, I did watch those, but yes, he sent me. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Do you have while you're looking for that, do you have a preference out of this?
When else are we going to get Bobby Fischer?
I don't know. I mean, when else are we going to get Bjorn Ferm?
That's also a good point.
That argument runs multiple ways.
Yeah.
I'm fine with Bobby Fischer if you want to go with that. I mean,
is chess sports though?
That's fair. I mean, it's. Does there have to be physical exertion involved? I'm inclined to say yes.
For chess?
Yeah. Well, there has to be.
So no.
So
to chess.
no.
Okay.
So I'm less inclined on the lack of physical exertion.
Man. I like the one where they cancel the World Series. I don't know who we put in the episode title for that. Earthquake in the episode
we
title?
Could do something like that. The 89 earthquake or something like that.
Yeah. Who do you like? I'm a little indifferent.
I'd probably lean towards the earthquake.
Okay, let's do the earthquake in the episode title.
Why not? The 89 earthquake. Something like that. One thing you liked?
One thing I liked this week, I had been hearing about one of our local constituents who I inherited from the guy that had my job before me.
Yeah.
And he goes, John, you need to go to his house. You need to see his tools. You need to go see his tools. And I was kind of like, how cool could this be? So I emailed this guy. I'd met with him a few times, and I scheduled an opportunity to go see his tools. He goes, his email back to me was, book about 2 hours.
Oh, my.
I ring the doorbell at his house. He comes out and goes, meet me on the side. That's where the workshop is. We walk into the workshop, and other than like the 4 walls, he had built everything in there.
Okay.
So there was a hickory floor. There was all these things. He gets all his lumber from fallen trees, And he goes and he buys the ones that are too skinny for the lumber mills and gets somebody to basically plane them out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then he's an antique planer collector.
Huh.
And so he has like 2,000 different types of planes, specifically molding planes.
Uh-huh.
So they have shapes to them.
Right.
His oldest is from the 1617, I think it was the oldest one. And it's just it's a wild piece of construction. And he had some for to make tongue and groove from like the 1850s. It was wild.
Yeah.
And he had one for like every pattern you could ever want.
Wow.
And he collected these. He even pointed to some, goes, that's the only one known in existence.
Wow.
And it was just very wild. I have pictures. If you're interested, you can shoot me a text. I can send you some pictures.
Yeah. That's funny.
He had some like old stuff. And some stuff he picked up off the wall. He goes, yeah, I got this at auction. I have no clue what it was for. It was wild. But I mean, I was there 2.5 hours looking at tools.
Yeah.
It was very cool. Antique tools, all sorts of things.
How old is this gentleman? Ballpark.
70s.
Okay.
70s for sure.
And he is still actively doing woodworking and projects and all that sort of stuff.
He had a little bathroom vanity that he was building for his basement that looked just absolutely stunning.
Nice.
Absolutely stunning.
Nice.
I will say he does not use those ancient tools because that was my initial thought. And he just looked at me and goes, no, I'm not going to use those. I have modern tools to make this stuff so much more easily.
Right. Why would I spend 8 hours using that tool when I could use this one in 15 minutes?
Yeah. So it was a wild.
Yeah, that's great.
Time. Anyway, what's your one thing?
So I just over the weekend finished a book by John Mead and Peter Gurry called Scribes and Scripture. Subtitle something like The Fascinating Story of How We Got Our Bible. So it deals with issues of like how were the books preserved, so textual criticism, the canon issues, like why these books and the other books, and like it's just a really good overview of just about any angle that someone might have of how do we get our Bible. And it includes talking about like translations, like even like English translations from like before the Reformation and through the Reformation, and then like contemporary English translations. And so there's a lot of interesting just little tidbits in there that I wasn't aware of in terms of some of the history behind different translations and that kind of thing. And it's very well researched, very well written, but still very accessible, I think, for an ordinary reader. You don't have to be a New Testament scholar to read it, follow it, benefit from it. So,
that's great.
Yeah, that's my.
I remember when that came out. What did that come out? 18 months ago? 2 years?
No more than that.
Okay. It's a fairly new publication.
Yes. So that is my one thing I liked. All right, John. We have teased our episode 200.
Dum, dum, dum.
Excited for it. We have talked college football. We've talked NFL football. We have talked godliness. We have talked the 1989 earthquake. We have talked about a guy that John met who has a lot of old tools.
Very cool old tools.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And we've talked about a book that I just recently read. And so I think, by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. So all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless you all real good.
Later.